Cup final practice, and instead of worrying about the high price of gas, how about checking out drivers who like to step on the gas? This weekend, the Texas Motor Speedway will host high speed and high drama, and if the past few weeks are any indication, we'll see some drivers ready maybe to fight each other on and off the track or in and out of their cars. 43 of the best drivers and teams gearing up, getting ready to go in the final tune-up before Sunday's big race. On Friday, Rocket Man, Ryan Newman in his Dodge, and the fastest car, and won his third pole in the last 5 races. But this college graduate with a degree in engineering doesn't exactly need a slide rule to figure out that no driver has ever won a Texas Cup race from the pole. Ryan Newman would like to try and be the first. 8 Texas races, 8 pole losers. Our corporate headquarters, the Hollywood Hotel, located in the infield of the Great American Speedway, as we go to where the races are to bring you closer to the action. And nice to have you join us. I'm Chris Myers. Glad you could saddle up for a great weekend of racing across the Fox family of networks. Now, right after this Nextel Cup practice session on FX, Busch Series racing on Fox. Shane Meal on the pole and on probation, as Meal will share the front row with Martin Truex Jr. Stories that we're following right now include Jeff Gordon. Can he win his second straight? Kurt Busch still forgiving of Gordon's bump and run last Sunday. And can Dale Earnhardt Jr. finally get his car and season in gear? Providing some of the answers in this final tune-up, my partner is always here in the Hollywood Hotel, former crew chief, still kind of a crew chief, Jeff Hammond. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
All right, they play Texas Hold'em, a card game here. Do you hold anything back for these crews as they get ready? Their last tune-up from 2 short track races now to a super speedway.
Well, one of the guys told me the other day what really happens here, the drivers are going through a reality check. I mean, you come back from a place like Bristol and Martinsville and jump in here to Texas, all of a sudden you're going almost 200 miles an hour down in these corners running side by side. You've got to have your act together. So in that first practice, they got a direction where they want to work on these cars, but now they're going to have to work to make sure that they got the right air pressure, the springs, the shocks. Make sure they got the camber right, because you're running this fast, you're really abusing these tires. You want to get the car balanced so that you do not wind up wearing either the right rear out or the right front out. So getting it where this driving right is really important. And one of the guys that's already had problems in the first practice was Greg Biffle, and I think he's standing by with our Dick Bergman.
Yeah, Biffle qualified 5th, and Dick Bergman has the latest. Dick?
And he was running very, very well in that practice session before he met the wall. He was second quick. What happened out there?
I just blew a right front tire. We don't know if we maybe ran something over, maybe had a failure on the tire. Maybe, you know, we don't think we had too much camber. We only had a ½ degree of camber in the right front, so that's not very much. But, you know, showing hot shoulder temps, so that means you got to take camber out. But it's unfortunate. I tell you what, that car was really fast. 29 lap tires. I was running 29 15s and 18s. That car could have won the race for sure. This is a car I won California with, so we're really excited about it. I don't know how it's going to, well, it's going to run on the bank track here at Texas, but we'll wait and see.
One of the neat things was watching all the Roush crew members just literally swarm this car when they brought it off the truck. I mean, there were just about every uniform was working on this car except somebody from Fox, and I did offer. Doug Richards said, don't bother. Let's go to Steve Burns.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dick. You know, in the offseason, the Dodge teams had such high hopes for the new Dodge Charger body design. Well, when the season started and they got out on the racetrack, they would all admit to you that they were disappointed. Well, the last 2 weeks we've been on the short tracks. The Dodge teams have worked extremely hard, testing at tracks like Kentucky, getting back in the wind tunnel, working on those bodies, and man, did it pay off here. As Chris Myers said, Ryan Newman on the pole in a Dodge, and Evernham Motorsports teammates Casey Kane and Jeremy Mayfield line up second and third, also in a Dodge. Mike Joy.
We'll see how that plays out over 500 miles tomorrow, Steve. Hi, everybody, along with Larry McReynolds and Darrell Waltrip. Darrell taking a look at the point standings. The top 10 have an average age of over 37. We're not hearing quite so much about young guns as we did. Has the smaller spoiler and the grippier tire taken the equation more out of the hands of the engineers and more into the hands of the experienced driver?
I think that it's more what we were accustomed to, say, 10 years ago. With the smaller rear blade, took away a lot of that rear downforce, puts a lot of the feel back in the driver's hands, which is what the drivers in NASCAR wanted to do. The unknown, though, is the tires. They keep messing with the tires, you know. They say they're softer, and so you take away downforce and put a softer tire on there, you're going to abuse it a little bit more. But I think that that's one of the things that plays into the older drivers' hands. They don't just mat it all the time. They kind of get on it real easy.
But DW, I think what this grippier, softer tire has done, it's put more on the shoulders of the crew chief. We're headed into race number 7. We continue to suffer through some tire problems. And I think the beam of being on a good handling race car right now and not, the right front is biting so hard in the racetrack. I think what these teams have to do when you're talking about a racetrack where, like Jeff Hammond talked about, going in the corner at almost 200 miles an hour, you have to come up with a very conservative front end setting for that right front, air pressure, and not use those tools to make that car turn, because I think that's what's getting a lot of these teams in trouble.
Well, one of the things, I keep pointing it out, the car sitting on down there on the racetrack or on the pit road right now, there are 4 inches off the ground. Now, when that car starts to go around the racetrack, that car is sinking. It's sinking 4 inches, plus the travel that it's going to get through the turn. It's so hard to predict where the camber is going to go on that right front. And if it goes too far, you get on the inside edge and you blow out the tire.
And as this day goes on, hopefully in this practice session, Steve or Dick can show us some of the camber settings on these cars, because they really look different. Chris?
Thanks. And to avoid that sinking feeling, leave it on the Fox family of networks across the weekend. FX Speed, of course, on Fox. Our NASCAR coverage later today. The O'Reilly 300 presented by Mr. Clean Auto Dry. That's on Fox. Matt Kenseth, your defending champ, tomorrow. NASCAR this morning on Speed gets things going. 12:30 Eastern, our pre-race show for the Samsung RadioShack 500 on Fox. Darrell talks with Rick Hendrick. We'll go 10 laps with Jeff Gordon. We'll talk live with Kurt Busch and a few other surprises that'll have you enjoying yourself as you tune in.
We'll take a look right now at Jeff Gordon getting ready to go practice.
We'll be back from Texas in a moment. FX, glad to have you along at the Texas Motor Speedway. Final practice for tomorrow's Nextel Cup race. Let's get back to Darrell, Larry, and Mike.
And this practice session, Chris, starts out a little bit slower than the quickest laps of the morning session as the sun beats down on Texas Motor Speedway and things begin to warm up. Jimmy Johnson, Casey Kane, Carl Edwards, Mark Martin, Bill Elliott, and Kyle Busch, who paced the first practice session, have the quickest laps early.
Well, Mike, as we saw in qualifying, as it warms up, the track definitely slows down. And that's what these guys are experiencing now. That first practice this morning, I love my car. Now you go back out a little later and it's heated up a little bit and you say, what y'all do to this thing?
Yeah, I mean, it just loses grip. The car just does not bite in the corner like it did with the cooler track temperatures.
Brian Newman on pole once again. He won it by 2/100ths of a second. But can he seal the deal come Sunday?
This is his kind of racetrack. Like you said, he's won here before, so I look for him to have a great day. He drives hard, and you got to be able to, you got to do that here, but you got to, you can't just abuse everything. But I think he'll have a great day here.
Steve?
Hey, Mike, the words had no sooner come out of Darrell Waltrip's mouth than we heard Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car say, I'm already too tight, and he had just run 2 laps. So they'll bring the 48 in and adjust on it.
And one of the things, Mike, you got to have at these speeds, you got to have a car that's got a little bit of push in the front end. You can't run around here with the back end hanging out. The driver, you'll lose it. You'll crash it. So if we're going to have issues, it's going to be more to the right front, like we've seen some problems there. It's because that's what the driver wants. You just can't have too much.
We need to correct one of our graphics when we were looking at Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car. It showed where he was starting 37th. He actually will be starting 18th tomorrow.
I think he started 37th last week.
Let's see what Dale Jr. is doing here. It's a nice Saturday morning. He's out for a little practice. Got quite a bit of wheel in it. He's coming through the dog leg here down into turn 1. See him crank on a little bit. Nice and smooth. He's not juking on the wheel, which is making it easier on that right front tire. He's up on the straightaway, relaxes a little bit just for a second, and now he says, I'll just quit. It felt pretty good.
And if you notice right there, the RPM band is from about 8,000 to 9,000 when he's up at speed. Darrell, you talked about this all week long. These teams have to be a little careful here. This is a 500-mile race, sustained RPMs. You don't want to chalk a lot of laps up in these 2 practice sessions.
No, I heard a couple of them on the scanners this morning say they were going to save a little bit because they're all aware, just like we are. We don't have to remind them. It is 500 miles.
A lot on those engines.
New colors for Rusty this weekend, carrying Kodak colors, and right behind him, Mike Wallace who among the drivers who started out of the top 35 this season, Mike Wallace has qualified for every race and put together a string of top 25 finishes.
Yeah, he's doing a good job with that team. And of course, Morgan McClure is just, you know, they're a mainstay of this sport. They've been around a long time. They're a single car team. They just keep plugging away here. Maybe if they can stick with Mike and then keep some sponsor on that car, they can continue to improve.
And they're finally getting caught up on cars. I talked to Chris Carey, the crew chief, that they're able to start going to test. They actually took this car last week and tested at Kentucky, which a lot of teams go to. So they're finally getting caught up on their program.
And you can test, and as you test, you improve, and it's starting to show up. They're getting good results.
Two drivers probably happiest to come to Texas and get away from the short tracks, and they're both out of the Roush camp. Defending Cup champion Kurt Busch and Carl Edwards, who has come together with Hermie Sadler, both at Bristol and at Martinsville. This first one was just an accordion-like deal that they got caught up in, but this one would spin around there.
This is the one that hurts right here, Mike. Yeah. Accident. Carl should have held the car on the bottom and not let it back out in the racetrack, and I don't think that would have happened, but for whatever reason, he let it loose and backed right up in front of Hermie.
Yeah, I talked to Carl's crew chief, Bob Osborne. He said, we're kind of glad to get back to a racetrack where we have a little elbow room now, a little more racing room, and this is that very car that won at Atlanta a few weeks ago.
And Hermie is also here, had to time his way into the race in the Peak Fitness Ford, and did so.
Now we found out who's starting 37th. Hermie Sadler will be in the 66 car.
I think that 37 is where Jimmy Johnson started.
I think the graphic is stuck.
Yeah. Everybody starts 37.
You want to see a weird looking paint job. Weird only because there he goes right there, the 25. Brian Vickers. We won't have any problem at all knowing where he is.
Now, I said in yesterday's qualifying coverage, it looks like that car that Rick Hendrick had in Days of Thunder. Now, it's that same kind of color.
Is that's the sponsor on that car you put on your hair, right?
So I'm told. Garnier Fructus.
So Larry is told.
Oh.
They gave me a case a couple of years ago. I still have a case left, though. Myself and Neil Goldberg, our producer. But now, you saw on the graphic where Brian Vickers qualified 24th position. He will have to go to the rear of the field because they had engine problems before qualifying yesterday, had to change the engine. So his qualifying run was pretty much for just pit selection only. He will have to start at the rear of the field. Racetrack's a little empty right now, DW. I think people are paying attention to the number of laps they're putting on these engines.
Too hot. It's too hot to run right now.
It'll be hot tomorrow, though.
Yeah, baby.
Michael Chiklis, Glenn Close, The Shield, an all-new episode Tuesday at 10 on FX. Check it out. We welcome you back here at Texas Motor Speedway. Don't forget later when this session is over on Fox, Busch Series Racing, Tony Stewart, Mark Martin. Among those you'll see also Carl Edwards, Jeff Hammond as we look at Greg Biffle's now on the track. Dick Bergen reporting some of the problems earlier and how the Roush crew just swarmed to pay attention and clue in.
Well, that's one of the big benefits right now of having 5 teams at the racetrack. That happened. This group, I mean, literally, there were so many different kind of uniforms from the Viagra team as well as the 16 car, the 99 car, Carl Edwards. I mean, they were all this. They came running right there to help him, and that's the reason why he's back out there on the racetrack, going to get some very valuable practice time so they can figure out what they need to do to this 16 car so they can get it back up there toward the front. And after unloading it, he looks pretty impressive early on. I mean, car looks pretty smooth. Again, this is the car he won with it earlier this year at California, so he likes it.
Roush teammate Carl Edwards. Let's get a check on the 99 car with Dick Berger. Dick?
Well, I talked to Carl Edwards after the first practice session this morning, and he just had a huge smile on his face and said that his car is, his quote, awesome. He has just been in the garage. The crew has talked with him about changes that they'd like to make. Virtually nothing. They did pull the right front wheel off. Jack Roush took a good look at it. So did Pierre Coutel. Right front looked just fine. They put it back on. Carl Edwards is back out again on the racetrack with a very fast race car.
Thanks, Dick. Here's where the Roush-Keteers will start tomorrow's Samsung RadioShack 500. Biffle in 5th, leading that group, who with Hendrick Motorsports have pretty much dominated competition so far this season. Kurt Busch will start 19th, and he is sore, and he doesn't feel too good either. Hit the wall hard last night during the running of the IROC race while leading, had a cut tire that we speculated was the result of running over a storm drain to take evasive action early, but it turned out that the left front tire compound was mounted on the right side, and that led to premature wear, and he took a hard hit into the wall last evening here.
You know, a lot of people asked early in the when the season started, could Kurt Busch repeat? And I made the observation that I think he's overdrawn at the luck bank, because he had an awfully lot of good luck at the last year. You think about Homestead and other places spinning out, losing wheels, and it's caught up with him this year.
Yeah, and the comment he made last night, he said, I am so tired of hitting the wall. Let's have a look at it here. This was last evening here at Texas. It's a pretty hard hit.
Yeah, I think this is 4 weeks in a row. You know, you get help from the 24, and then you blow a tire at Atlanta. And just one thing after the next. I can't shake this deal. I don't know why it blew out.
Now, Jeff Gordon, last week's winner, ran 3 non-competitive laps, went back to the garage, and now he's back out on track. But he is 41st of 43 drivers in this practice. In the morning practice, he was only 18th quickest.
Mike, I can tell you what they're struggling with. Jeff Gordon said moments ago, he said, I'm too loose. I'm actually on the verge of wrecking when I get into the corner, and it gets onto the right rear tire, it slides out. I like what the front end is doing, but I need that rear to plant. So they came in, made some adjustments, and he's back out there.
Here's Gordon's career at Texas. He's never won here, one of only 4 racetracks on which he's not scored a victory.
Don't you know that, I mean, it's 71 victories and the success he's had, and when he comes to Texas, he has to hear, well, you've never won here.
But he's been on a mark, though, 4 consecutive top 5 finishes. But, Darrell, I have to believe that's what the challenge of the crew chief and the chassis guy with feedback from the driver is going to be here. We always come here and we fight the cars. The more you run, not turning, the front sliding. And I think that's still going to go on from a chassis standpoint. But with that shorter rear spoiler now, you're going to be aero loose and chassis tight. And that's hard to compromise.
That's exactly right, Larry. You're going to holler, I'm pushing and I'm loose. And the crew chief's going to be scratching his head like you used to
Which
do.
is bothering you the most.
1 week ago, what a comeback for Jeff Gordon. He got 3 laps down, and yes, he did get the free pass 1 time after having tire problems and making this unscheduled stop under green. But then he got down into Kurt Busch in what could best be described as an ill-timed move while racing his way back to the front. Finally took the lead from Sterling Marlin to win it.
And I was a little bit critical, you know, of Jeff. I said he should have given Kurt, cut him a little slack, and he could have. But you got to remember something, and I do too, it's the end of the race. And you only get so many chances to get that nose in there, so you better take advantage of it when you do.
Let's check with Steve.
Hey, Mike, an update. When you're talking about Jeff Gordon's stats, as he went back out, he said, I'm still twitchy in the corners. I can get on the throttle well and carry speed, but now I'm a little tight on exit. So they're bringing the 24 in. They're going to drop some air pressure in his left front tire. What's going on in your end, Dick Berggren?
Well, Greg Biffle has just come off the racetrack, and his car is not nearly as fast as he might like. Right now, he is 33rd on the board, and as he came in, he asked about Carl Edwards' setup and wondered what he might have. Crew Chief Doug Richards said, I'm not going to talk about that on the radio, but I will tell you what he's got. Car's pushing a little bit, but still, I mean, they've just done a miraculous job of getting this backup car out and on the racetrack in very little time.
You know, Larry, I would think a car that was happy at California, kind of low bank, fast racetrack, 2 miles, but not near the banking we have here. I think that would be a little bit of a challenge to get that car happy on this 24-degree banking here with the kind of speeds you're running.
Well, like we were talking earlier, these teams spend so much time testing and in the wind tunnel. I've been talking to Doug Richard about this car that they won Fontana with. They've been carrying it as a backup car, and he says, you know, I know we won the race. Obviously, that proves it was a pretty good race car, but it's by far not our best race car from all the data we have off of it.
Jimmy Johnson quickest, Casey Kane second. And why was Greg Biffle asking about Carl Edwards' setup? Because he is 3rd fastest, and he's the fastest Ford right now. Defending winner of the 500 here, Elliott Sadler. Where's he on the chart? 15th quickest. And Mark Martin running one of several retro paint schemes that he'll have this season. This celebrates his first years with Jack Roush and that upward block, kind of Mark Donahue style number 6 on the Viagra Ford.
Running pretty darn good. He's 4th quick, and his average lap times over 10 or so laps is really, really good, Larry.
He's out there on a long run right now, but yeah, Mark has been with Roush Racing since 1988, but the first time they went to Victory Lane together was at Rockingham in '89. This is what the car was painted like, and of course Mark will be in the Busch Series race later on today on Fox. 2 starts this year so far, 2 wins, going for that 3rd one.
And if there's one driver that could sweep the weekend here at Texas, you're looking at him.
They're what you was talking about right there, Darrell, and this is the best 10-lap average. And Casey Kane right now is 2nd quickest as far as a fast lap, but 1st quickest as far as the best 10-lap averages. Look at old Bill Elliott there running this weekend here at Texas. This is what's important right now. It's not who's the fastest, but who's the fastest for the longest period of time.
Remember what Terry Labonte's car looked like when he won the Cup Championship way back? Had Piedmont Airlines, which is kind of long gone, as well as that Billy Hagan team, but that is how the car looked with, of course, this year's GMAC logos.
It was a little bit of a nail biter for Terry Labonte yesterday in qualifying. Yeah, you see he's going to start dead last in the show. Just glad to be here and glad to be in the race.
I'm not sure if this is a retro scheme, but it sure is different for Rusty Wallace. Some of the other Penske sponsors besides Miller Beer wanting in on Rusty's last fall season, so that is the Kodak Miller Light Dodge. So maybe with yellow and red, Rusty can kind of sneak up on him. We'll see.
He'll have to be real cautious.
So let's go to 2 guys who have a little spring in their step.
You know, like yellow.
Yeah, down at the cutaway car.
At the Ford cutaway car. All right, you heard Darrell, the guys talking about height, compression, turning in the corner. How do you know which spring to use when exactly? And by the way, these look like Slinkies a little bit if you painted them red.
Well, what you're looking at right now is you hear about teams talking about, I'm going to work on the setup. I'm going to run a little softer setup. Just to give you an idea of some of the differences, these are the 2 rear springs. Our 2 rear springs. This is a 300-pound rear spring. This is a 1,000-pound rear spring. So what you try to do, Chris, you may come and you may want to put like a 750 in the right rear to match up maybe with a 400 or 500-pound to make the car kind of turn through the corner. Front spring, same way. 1,300-pound front spring, a 500-pound front spring. This is where Darrell was talking about the way the car is compressed in the corner. A softer setup, the car is going to travel a lot. So you got to anticipate how much it's going to go down in the corner to allow this type of setup to work. If you decide you want the car to sit up a little bit, you'll lower it down. You'll go with a stiffer spring to keep that travel down to make the car have a proper attitude. Aero balance is so important. You try to kick the back of the car up and make it work with like a rear spoiler. The guys, even though they cut the rear spoiler off, they still want to get it up in the air as much as possible. Stick that nose in the ground to make it turn around the corner.
Is it that obvious to the crew chief, or is there driver input with some help in this area through the course of the race?
Well, really during the course of the practice, you really need all that driver input. Your engineers have a lot to do with it. They'll help you try to come up with the different types of combinations you may want to try. But the final input is the driver. He's going to tell you, this feels good, I can race it, and I can drive it, and you've got to believe that's what it needs to be done. Because if the driver is wrong, well, the whole team's going to be wrong, but you got to believe in that driver. He's your onboard computer all weekend long.
All right, Larry, how about in-race adjustments from the crew chief?
Well, yeah, exactly. In the practice, you see them changing springs right there, but one thing they can do in the race to adjust the springs, you really can't change springs, but you use what we call a spring rubber. And what you do, if you have that spring rubber in there, you see it right there, that increases the rate of that spring about 15 pounds. And on a pit stop, a crew can reach in there and yank that rubber out, especially in the rear springs, and it'll decrease the rate of that spring. This is what they'll do to adjust the rate of the springs during the race.
Now, you made that sound so simple, but is that a soft rubber? Is that a yellow rubber? Is that a black rubber?
Oh, yeah, we have all sizes, we have all kinds, but all I know is watching Chris Myers, as Jeff was explaining, I have never seen a more confused individual.
Steve Burns.
Well, Mike, this 38 team is doing exactly what Jeff Hammond just illustrated. They're changing springs down here Sadler, the defending champion of this event, says, I don't like the way this car's handling at all. It feels like the rear end wants to come around on me. So they're going to change tires, they changed front shocks, and they just put in 2 different rear springs, and he's going to head back out. Meanwhile, Tony Stewart in the 20 car just came in, and sure enough, they changed the left rear spring. They had 2 spring rubbers loaded in that. They said that, or Tony said that after the 20, his car runs about 10 laps, and it feels pretty good. Let's go to Dick Berger now.
With a tale of a couple of teammates, Ryan Newman and Rusty Wallace are garaged side by side. But what a difference in the strategy as to how they do these practice sessions. Newman describes the behavior of his car, which right now is loose. He's not particularly fast on the racetrack, 35th. Rusty Wallace, on the other hand, pulls into his garage, and he tells his team specifically what he wants. This time, he wanted more rebound in the left front shock absorber. Very different strategies. One lets the crew chief decide, one the driver decides. And with Rusty, it's always the driver that decides.
And, of course, Ryan Newman, his crew chief, Matt Borland, those guys have been together even before they started full-time in Nextel Cup, and I think those guys probably can communicate without even talking to one another. They know what each other's looking for. They know what each other is thinking. Of course, Rusty Wallace has been used to being a hands-on driver for all these years, second year with his crew chief, Larry Carter, and there's no question, I'm not surprised that there's a difference in strategies. You see Casey Mears in the 41 car. Now, he's actually in a backup car. Soon as practice opened yesterday, he blew a right front tire, and we didn't really report that yesterday. We just thought he got up out of the groove, but he blew a right front tire, hit the wall. They went to a backup car. Now, since Casey went to the car before qualifying, he qualified 32nd. He'll actually be able to start in that position since it was before qualifying.
Something to think about as we go to break. What driver and crew chief have been paired together the longest in Nextel Cup? The answer when we come back.
Declare your citizenship to the biggest NASCAR show to hit the air. NASCAR Nation, it's on Speed Channel. Special features like NASCAR Beyond the Wheel, Home Base, The Big Story. NASCAR fans can now stay closer than ever to America's biggest motorsport. Don't miss NASCAR Nation this week only on Speed. Back here at Texas Motor Speedway on the Final Cup practice for tomorrow's race on Fox. Jeff, you were talking about springs and the usage here. You showed us 4 different ones. How many more are there that you have to use?
Well, most of these teams, they'll have somewhere upwards or more than 100 springs on their trucks because they look at trying to get anywhere from 10 to 25-pound increments, and then they'll take their spring rubbers that Larry and Darrell were talking about, whether it was a black one or a yellow one or a red one, and they'll try to fine-tune what they need because they're getting to the point where they're running that, what we consider that razor's edge to make these cars be exactly like they want them. And when they get the car where they feel like it's balanced, they really work hard on it.
Ironman Ricky Rudd getting ready for another consecutive race tomorrow, tacking on to his ongoing record. Let's rejoin Darrell, Larry, and Mike.
It's kind of funny. They rate springs, the same, car springs, the same way as mattress springs. If your 300-pound buddy stands on a spring and it collapses 1 inch, that's a 300-pound spring. And going into the garage, that's the answer to the question we posed. When Joe Gibbs formed his second team, they interviewed Greg Zipadelli for a shock specialist or car chief job. But Jimmy Makar was so convinced of Zippy's success, winning championships in Busch North and in the modifieds as a crew chief, he and Joe Gibbs got together. They offered Zippy the job, and this is he and Tony's 7th year together.
And I think one reason they have a lot of success together is they're good friends too. And I think, Darrell, that's the reason you and Jeff had a lot of success. It's the reason Davey Allison and myself had a lot of success, is our relationship went well beyond that garage area with that race car.
Yeah, he's the calming force in that pair right there. Very calm, cool. He's the glue that's held that team together in a number of situations.
There's another streak that pair owns, 51 straight weeks in the top 10 in points. Now, to put that in a little perspective, you have to have a good Daytona 500 to keep that up, because that starts the season when everybody's at 0. But that is impressive. Steve?
And Mike, just to update you on the handling characteristics of this number 20 car for Tony Stewart. He says he's just a little bit tight from the center of the corner to the exit. So they're going to come in and adjust the shocks front and rear. They also may make an adjustment with a track bar. Dick Berggren.
Car number 42, Jamie McMurray, has got a good race car here in this happy hour session. He right now is 7th quick on the boards. He has just been into the garage where they made a sway bar adjustment to try to tighten the automobile up a little bit. This is the same car that he used earlier this year in California. And what's important about that is he got his best finish of the year with this car in California, Mike.
Thanks, Dick. We're going to ask you fellas to update some drivers that are out of the top 30, and kind of questionably so. Pole sitter Ryan Newman is out of the top 30. Jeff Burton as well, but Bobby Labonte, who's had a lot of success here, and Jeff Gordon is out of the top 40 in practice speeds. Now that's a surprise.
The only thing I can think of is this racetrack goes green. I mean, there'll be a long spells of green here racing tomorrow. And these guys may be running on really older tires trying to get that right feel for a long green run.
One fellow who is in the top 5 is Bill Elliott, running a limited schedule in one of Ray Evernham's cars. This Stanley Tools Dodge qualified well, and he is 5th on the board right now.
All the Evernham cars are running good here this weekend. Of course, Jeremy Mayfield, Casey Kane, they will start 2nd and 3rd tomorrow, and a lot of testing been going on with this organization. In fact, I talked to Slugger Labby, Jeremy Mayfield's crew chief. He said in the last 2 weeks they've been to Kentucky twice. They went to a short track to test for Martinsville. They were in Phoenix testing, and said all their focus has been around the aero of this new Dodge Charger. They've hit on something, and when you hit on something like that, it helps you everywhere.
And I think that what happened to the Dodge teams to start the year off, I think they got a little confused. That car, the new Charger, was better in the wind tunnel than the Intrepid was. Better numbers, but they've struggled to find the balance. And I think they're about to turn that corner. And Jeff, what do you know about that?
DW, what they found out about this new Dodge Charger, that during the off-season when they were doing their testing, it really felt good to these guys. It felt like the front end was digging in. It was doing exactly what they had hoped it would do when they developed the new Dodge Charger. But when they got into the race scenario, just like at Las Vegas early on, they found out the car was not quite as balanced as it needed to be in traffic especially. So that's the reason why for a lot of teams, and Ray Evernham's been a big proponent of it, they had to go back and they had to cut the bodies off these cars and move them around to get the car back balanced. Jeremy Mayfield told me, along with Casey Kane, that now they feel like they've found that balance, and his cars are starting to work good during qualifying as well as during the race. And that's where they were really missing the boat early on. The car would be okay for qualifying, but just too aggressive the way they felt with the front end and the configuration ends early on. So now they got it back where they wanted and really looking good. And you talk about guys making long runs. Darrell, you know how Rusty Wallace is about working on his race car, but Rusty in the first practice ran 40 laps. He's already run, 31 laps in his second practice session, which to me shows how determined he is to get that car of his balanced like he wants it so that he can be competitive tomorrow. There's a good look at him right there. You may not, again, recognize that color, but that's the 2 car of Rusty Wallace right there, yellow and red this weekend.
Yeah, Jeff, one of the things I think Rusty does struggle with is closing the deal. I mean, we've seen him run up front a lot early in a race. Seemed like last pit stop, latter 100 miles of the race is where he's had a problem. So I think that's what he's thinking about today.
And Darrell, I think one of the things that all of these teams are thinking about here, Sterling Marlin in the 40 car had a good qualifying run yesterday, is they want to make sure and make a long run. If there is a tire problem on their car, it will show up, because it won't show up in the early part of a run. It'll show up late in the run. But just to put a period on what Jeff and I were talking about on the aero of these Dodges, like Sterling Marlin, is I think when Jeff and I were spending a lot of time in the wind tunnel in the 80s and 90s, we looked at drag, we looked at downforce. Now these teams go in there and they're looking at wheel weights, they're looking at side force. So you may look at the old things we used to look at and have a pretty good car, but when you go a little deeper, it may not be as good as you think.
Yeah, and the thing about a race car is, folks, it's a big piece of metal. And when you start putting templates on it, those templates, as long as you don't change the size of that metal, it can be tilted up, it can be tilted down, it can be rolled over, it can be in a lot of different shapes and still fit the template.
All I can know is it can be aggravating sometimes.
Jimmy Johnson with his biggest lead of the season on the Nextel Cup points, 160 over Greg Biffle coming to Texas. Elliott Sadler, who won this race a year ago, well positioned. And look at the veterans: Mark Martin, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, Rusty Wallace. Then there's Ryan Newman. Has been doing a good job. Kevin LePage missed the show. And Bobby Labonte. Boy, you talk about a team that's had no luck at all. That Joe Gibbs team has been running on empty this season. 561 points out of the lead and out of the top 35.
And running great last week at Martinsville. Engine failure.
And Mike, I think the biggest thing when you look at the top 10 in points, Jeff Hammond was talking about this earlier, what the two short tracks did really jumbled things up. Really and truly going into Bristol 2 races ago, of the top 10, only 2 teams had solid runs or had no troubles in both races, and that was Jimmy Johnson and Elliott Sadler. Then you had people like Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Jamie McMurray had 2 bad races. Then you had people like Tony Stewart, Kevin Harvick, and Jeff Gordon, 1 good race, 1 bad race.
6 straight weeks outside the top 30. Labonte trying to rebound and get out of this slump. Our pole sitter, Ryan Newman, we last saw him, he was 32nd on the speed chart, and that is where he sits, Dick.
And that's after having come into the garage, Mike, having 4 fresh tires put on the car, having a track bar adjustment made to it, and also having a round of wedge adjusted in the automobile. He just came on the radio, said the car is loose. We have heard on the radio today just about every symptom from Ryan Newman. The car is loose, the car is tight, but he mostly is having trouble getting the car to properly enter the corner, and that is what they have tried to adjust for. He has been told to stay out until the end of this run so they can figure out how much gas this thing is eating per lap.
Well, let's keep in mind, as the track gets hotter, it gets slower, and right now Newman's times are only about 2/10 off of what the fast guys are running right now.
It's amazing to me how the cat wins the poles, though. I mean, that's a given. And, you know, there hadn't been a lot of cars in NASCAR through the years that could just almost be on the pole every week. But that cat, he's there every week. He and his team have got something figured out.
And you see right there, Kurt Busch in the 97 car. Right now, he's 23rd quickest. He qualified back in 19th position yesterday. And 4 Texas starts, he has 3 top 10 finishes, so normally pretty solid here.
Past winners here, Jeff Burton and Mark Martin have logged the most laps in this practice. There's a look at Burton. Average lap time about 29.80. That's what he's running right now. Steve?
Mike, wanted to update Jeff Gordon. You mentioned he was still at the bottom of the speed charts. He just said, I'm still very loose on new tires. I'm turning the wheel in the corner, but it feels like nothing's happening. He said, I'm afraid to carry too much speed in there. Maybe I'm just afraid of spinning out. So they are, in fact, struggling in this practice.
There's a big problem there, Darrell, because he's been running field filler lap times in this practice.
Yeah, and Jeremy Mayfield, he drove around Jeff and drove away from Jeff. It wasn't like he was not trying. The car is just not there for him right now.
But on the contrary, his teammate Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car, he's ran 32 laps in this session. And right now he's at the top of the speed charts. Now his fast lap is 28.92. His last lap time though was 30.11.
What's funny about that fastest lap, Larry, was it was his 2nd lap on the track, following which he came in and said, I can't drive it.
Well,
but it was fastest.
Yeah, these guys know you almost have to block this speed chart out right now. It's just like Ryan Newman and those guys. I know they're way down the list, but right now, yeah, you care about how fast you run, but what you're looking for is that driver saying the car's driving good.
And the driver knows what kind of conditions he's under. You know, if he had 4 brand new tires on when he went out, maybe a little bit of a low air pressure, and he knows, hey, this thing won't last. You know, it's going to go away in a hurry if I'm not bad off right now.
See Ryan Newman right there talking to his crew right now, Dick.
Yeah, well, he was supposed to have stayed out on the racetrack, but Newman just said it is way loose. So rather than staying out, he has decided to come in, talk it over with crew chief Matt Borland. Been very impressed listening to these guys. They do not have the race car the way they want it, and some other crews would be hollering, screaming, jumping up and down, but these are a bunch of engineers, and they don't seem to have much emotion about them.
I don't see very many people that's very happy with their race cars now that happy hour is over with.
Yeah, happy hour is largely a misnomer.
I can tell you what it used to mean.
Tell us when we're in break. Sterling Marlin has hung up his hat and his spurs and gone to the house. so's everybody else as this final practice session is over. Things getting dialed in and tweaked. And here is the telling tale. Best consecutive 10 laps. Casey Kane, Carl Edwards, Mark Martin, Bill Elliott.
I'd say that's pretty good medicine for Carl Edwards right there.
Excellent. Steve?
And I'll tell you one team that is happy. That's the 48 team of Jimmy Johnson, your points leader and crew chief Chad Canals. Jimmy just told the team, I've got a good feel for the car. And Chad Canals said, good hustle, guys. Real good practice. Dick?
Carl Edwards just walked by me, and he had a big smile on his face after getting out of his race car. He was 3rd quick in that practice session, 4th quick earlier today. Tomorrow, he will start in the 20th position. A lot of cars to pass, but this is a racetrack where a fast, brave guy like Carl Edwards can get the job done and move it to the front. Mike?
Here's a look at the starting lineup. 3 Dodges at the front of the field. Veteran Ricky Rudd with them there in the Wood Brothers Ford.
I've been saying it all week long. We've been here 8 times, 8 different winners. I just firmly believe possibly that number 9 car we'll see winner number 9 tomorrow.
Well, he's finished second, I think, as many times as Harry Gant before he finally got that breakthrough win. So it's possible, but a lot can happen in 500 miles, and that's why 200,000 people will be here.
Well, it's a lot like Atlanta. I think you're going to see a very similar race to what we saw at Atlanta. It's going to be a gooder.
We'll have it for you tomorrow on Fox, Chris.
Defending champ Elliott Sadler. So crew chiefs, they're going to have a sleepless night after this final session. Jeff Hammond?
I think you're going to have to kind of like, take a little bit with a grain of salt. The track warmed up quite a bit since the first practice session, and what they'll be looking to do is trying to see where everybody else is. And I think everybody, Larry McReynolds brought it out, they're not very happy with their race cars. They're talking right now, trying to figure out where are we, how do we stack up. Let's make the right adjustments and not dial ourselves out.
So track temperature will affect whether guys sizzle or fizzle. Coming up, Fear Factor on FX, or flip over to Fox for Busch Series Racing. It's a big weekend of racing here at Texas Motor Speedway. Don't forget tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern after the O'Reilly 300 today. Matt Kenseth, by the way, your defending champ. You'll see Mark Martin and Tony Stewart in action as well. Tomorrow, NASCAR this morning gets it going. NASCAR Victory Lane closes it out. We'll see you on Fox if you want to watch Busch Series Racing right now.